Hello and welcome to Gapeys Grow Room. I've been saying for the past few weeks that I'm going to do a video comparing some LED lights that I have, and today is the day I'm going to be doing that. We're going to be comparing the Mars Hydro TS1000 I've had for a couple of years with the Spider Farmer SF1000 that I just got this year. Stay tuned to the end of the video where I'll share my thoughts and opinions on each one and let you know which one I prefer. Let's go ahead and take some measurements. You may notice the Mars Hydro over here is noticeably larger than the Spider Farmer, but let's see by how much. So the Spider Farmer here is 12 3/4 inches by 11 3/8 inches. And then the Mars Hydro, this hood on here makes one of the dimensions a little bit longer. You may not be able to tell, but the hood is straight up and down on these sides, but on these sides it kind of angles out to the side. So we're just gonna measure the panel itself. Here we've got 14 1/8 inch. And then this way we've got right at about 11 inches. If we measure from the hood, it increases a little bit and we've got about 12 5/8 inches. Let's take a look at the weight. The Spider Farmer, I'm going to include the cable since I can't disconnect the Spider Farmer cable. We've got 4 pounds and 11 5/8 ounces. If we look at the grams, that's 2 kilograms and 145 grams. Here's the Mars Hydro weighing in at 4 pounds, 9 5/8 ounces, which is 2 kilograms and 90 grams. Surprisingly, the Mars Hydro is actually not as heavy as the Spider Farmer, which is surprising because there's a lot more cable here compared to the Spider Farmer, and we've got this hood weight, which we don't have on the Spider Farmer. Let's take a quick look at the cords. So if we follow the cord all the way down, it looks like they're pretty much the same length, but if we stretch these out a little bit, the Mars Hydro is actually a couple inches longer. As far as the cable length goes, I measured 88 inches for the Mars Hydro and 85 inches for the Spider Farmer. And I do want to point out, we've got these connection points. So this is the Mars Hydro. You can remove that, which makes it a little bit easier to run the cable through wherever you need. Here's a closer look at the Spider Farmer cable and how it possibly comes apart. These two things on the end here that you need to spin off, and then there's another two things that you need to spin off, and then that reveals 3 cables on each side, but these do not seem to twist off or come apart in any way. So if you know how or if these are supposed to come apart, let me know, because I would be interested. But in any case, if they do come apart, it's not very easily, and it's kind of a pain, and I don't know what the purpose of this is. While we're talking about cables, I wanted to mention something that Mars Hydro has that Spider Farmer does not have, is this extra cable here. So this is the cable that connects the driver here to the panel itself. And some people may want to detach the driver from the LED panel to save on heat. So especially if you're running this inside a small area like a grow tent, you may want to remove this driver and attach the driver somewhere outside of the grow tent just to keep the inside of the tent a little bit cooler. That's not something that I plan on ever doing, but that is a nice feature to have if that's something you're thinking about doing. So just keep that in mind. And you can also detach this very easily from the panel, whereas the Spider Farmer, it does have this thing here, but I did try taking this off and it doesn't, I couldn't figure out how to detach this cable. So I'm not sure if that actually comes off, or if it does, it's not as easy as the Mars Hydro is to take off. Let's take a look at the controller here for a minute. Both of the lights have a switch, 2 of these channel ports, which is used for the daisy chaining, and then the dimmer knob. This looks the same over on the Mars Hydro. One big difference is the use of this switch here. So on the Mars Hydro, you can see it says on and off. So that is the switch you use to turn the light on. So it's on right now. And to turn it off, you flip the switch off. But that is not how you turn on and off the light on the Spider Farmer. So on the Spider Farmer, you turn it on by the dimmer switch. So right now it's off, and now it's on. Now it's off. So that is how the on-off works on the Spider Farmer versus the Mars Hydro. I actually like it better to use the switch to turn off and on rather than the knob. The switch on this one, this controls the daisy chaining. So when it's on dim, that means the daisy chaining is not set up. But as soon as you switch it to EXT, you'll notice the light comes on, but the dimmer will not work. Because when you have this set to EXT, that means that there's another light that is plugged into one of these ports that is controlling the dimming. So whichever one is your primary light will control the dimming. So this doesn't matter what you set this on at, it's going to stay the same if it's on EXT. So if you're not using the daisy chaining for the dimming, then you turn it to the dim setting, and then you can control the brightness with the dimmer. One thing I think that Spider Farmer did right is they set up their percentages or numbers on the dimmer switch to make it really easy to use. So between 20 and 40, you can see there's three separate notches, and each notch is the equivalent of 5%. So it goes from 20 to 25 to 30 to 35 and then to 40, which makes a lot of sense, right? Well, Mars Hydro did not make it that easy. So over here on Mars Hydro, they've got 25 to 50, and there's 3 notches between 25 and 50, which is not an easily counted number. So you would think maybe they would do 5, but it goes 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. So that's not right. So when I did the math, it ended up being like just over 6 per notch. So even at 6, you end up at 49 instead of 50. So it really made no sense why they chose those notches between those 2 numbers. Let's talk about the LEDs or diodes that are on each of these panels. So the Spider Farmer has a total of 218 of these LEDs. It's got 7 of the 660 nanometers, which is a red light. That's these little lights here. And it's got 3 of the infrared 740 nanometers. And the infrared and the red both look pretty much the same. You can't really tell which ones are which until you turn on the light, but you can definitely tell by the color. And then it's also got a mix of 3000 Kelvin and 5000 Kelvin. So the 3000 Kelvin is more of a warm light, so it's kind of an orangish hue. And there's 142 of those. And then the 5000 Kelvin is a cooler light, which is a more of a blue light, and there's 66 of those. So I believe that's the count. I counted the ones you can kind of see. There's dark orange, and then there's also yellow. So I think the dark orange are the warm or 3000 Kelvin, and then the lighter yellow are probably the cool. So I couldn't find anywhere online that said how many of each there were. So I did count them, and that was my count. Now the Mars Hydro here has a lot more LEDs on the panel. There's 354. It has the same color temperature LEDs as the Spider Farmer, but there are far more of them, and they use the Bridgelux brand diodes, which I think are not as good as the Samsung. But I also did a count of these because I couldn't find how many of each it had either. But I counted 224 of the 3000 Kelvin, 112 of the 5000 Kelvin, 16 of the 660 nanometer red lights, and then only 2 of the infrared 740 nanometers. Let's now take some temperature readings on the driver and the units. I've had them running at 100% power for the last hour or so, and don't worry, I didn't have them laying on the carpet like that this whole time, which probably isn't very safe. I just put them that way just now so that we could take a temperature reading a little bit easier. So let's start with the Mars Hydro. The driver itself is at about 140 degrees, depending on where we put that. Looks like 140 is about the highest temperature reading we're getting. And then the hood here, we're getting some 80 to 90 degree temperatures, depending where we take the temperature reading at. And this is all in Fahrenheit. All right, let's take a look at our spider farmer. So we've got 119 to, looks like 126 is the hottest reading that we're getting. And then on the panel here, we're getting 125 degrees Fahrenheit, pretty evenly all across the entire panel, which is interesting. So we saw a lot of variation in the hood here as far as temperature goes, but the spider farmer is pretty consistently around 125 degrees across the entire panel. Got the spider farmer hooked up to a watt meter, and it's been running for about 10 minutes now, a little over 10 minutes, and we're at 98.8. It is a 100 watt light, and when I first plugged it in, it was, let's see, it was at 100.8 when I first plugged it in, so that's the high, and it has slowly dropped down to 98.8 watts, and that's at 100% power. Now we've got our Mars Hydro hooked up to the watt meter, and we're reading 151.5. So it's rated at a 150 watt light, and it's going just over that. Let's see what the max was. 154.0 was the max, and it's kind of been slowly going down since I plugged it in, but it seems to have stopped at 151.5, and that's at 100% power. One of the things I was really curious about, and you may be also, we all know that the Mars Hydro is a more powerful light. It's 150 watts versus the Spider Farmer, which is 100 watts. And I wanted to know what percent do we need to set the Mars Hydro at to equal the same light intensity as the Spider Farmer. So I have both of these lights set to 25 inches from this tabletop here, and I use my Apogee light meter to measure the PAR first of the Spider Farmer at 100% intensity, and I got a reading of 250 PAR in the center. I put a little mark there to mark the center. So then I found the center of the Mars Hydro light, and I just kept reducing the percent power until I saw the reading of 250, and that turned out to be about 81%. And then I went ahead and took a watt reading of that, and we ended up with 94.1 watts. So it's interesting to me that the wattage was actually less than what the Spider Farmer wattage was at the same light intensity. And my theory is that this hood here on the Mars Hydro, I think that is creating a lot less light leakage. So there's a lot of light being reflected from the inside of this hood that's kind of focusing the light more in the center. And I think it's really helps a lot to keep that light from it really escaping. Whereas the Spider Farmer has no hood at all, so you get a lot of light leakage and it just spreads a lot more. So I think that's why the Mars Hydro is much better in that respect. All right, next we're going to check out the color balance of the lights. This is something I looked for online and couldn't find anywhere. So we're going to be using an app called KevWB. So let's take a look. And right now it's at the lowest power, so let me turn that up. This is the Mars Hydro, and we're looking at about 5200 Kelvin. Let's check out the Spider Farmer light. So Spider Farmer, we're looking at 5196 Kelvin. So they are very close to each other as far as the color temperature goes. All right, I just finished doing some more light tests with the apogee meter, and I set up a 2-foot by 2-foot grid on this foam board here, and the grid is a 4x4 square, so we've got 16 squares, and I measured the par with the apogee meter in the center of each of these squares, as well as the very center of the light. And both of these lights have a 3x3 footprint that they can cover, but my grow shelf is not that large, so I decided to just test a 2x2. And I did each light individually, and both I did at 100% power. So let's take a look at the results. So we'll start with the Mars Hydro. The center at 100% and a distance of 24 inches from the sensor was 400 par. The corners in the back were 298 and 291, and the front corners were 243 and 251 par. And I think the reason the back was a higher par than the front is because it was up against a wall, and the wall is white, which probably reflected some of the light back onto the test equipment. So I think that's the reason for that, and I saw the same thing with the Spider Farmer. Now, as far as the percentage of decrease in light intensity, it was about 26 to 27% decrease in the back and 37 to 40% decrease in the front corners. Now let's take a look at the Spider Farmer. So as we know, the Spider Farmer is a 100 watt while Mars Hydro was 150 watt, so we're not going to see as high of a par value. So the center we had 247, the back corners were 195 and 190, and the front corners were 159 and 158. So again, we saw the back was a little bit higher than the front. We had a 23 to 21% decrease in power in the back and a 35 to 36% decrease of power in the front corners. So it looks like, surprisingly, the Spider Farmer did not have as big of a percentage of light loss in the corners as the Mars Hydro. I was expecting the Mars Hydro to be better because of that hood that it has, which should center the light a little bit more and not cause the light to spread out. It's possible because we did a test on the 2 feet by 2 feet footprint that it may not have been as much light loss as we would expect. So testing it at 3 by 3, we might see a little bit more light loss on the Spider Farmer. For a 2 by 2 foot grow space, which I think probably most people may use it for, it should work just fine. I wanted to show you the two manuals for both lights and some of the tips that they have as far as distance and power of the lights. So both have a germination of 24 to 30 inches hanging distance. Now, one thing that I do like about the Spider Farmer is it tells you what percentage to set the dimmer to. I didn't see any information at all in the Mars Hydro recommending any change to the dimmer, so I can't imagine you would leave it at 100% because that would be way too much power. They expect you to figure out yourself, I guess, or maybe they have something on their website that tells you that. And as far as the seedlings, both say 24 inches hanging distance, and the Spider Farmer suggests 50 to 75% on the dimmer. And then for vegetative, both again are right on the money, 18 to 24 inches. And the Spider Farmer says 75 to 100%. And then for flowering distance, both say 12 to 18 inches. And for the Spider Farmer, it does say 100%. All right, that is the end of our tests for this video. If there's anything that I missed or any questions that you have about either of these lights, please let me know, and I will try to do whatever testing I can and answer any questions that you have. Leave those in the comments of this video, and I will respond as soon as I can. All right, now as far as which one is my preference, honestly, they're really both great lights. But if I really had to choose one, I think I would probably, at least for the purpose that I'm using them for on this grow shelf, I would probably pick the Spider Farmer. And the reason for that is, one, I think it looks better. It seems to be better quality built. And I do prefer the dimmer knob there, and I talked about the notches that go between the numbers. It just makes more sense than how the Mars Hydro is set up. Now, I'm not saying Mars Hydro is a bad light. I would definitely, if I needed more power, I would definitely choose the Mars Hydro because it is a lot more powerful. Just the 50-watt difference is a pretty big difference. But for this grow shelf and only doing 24 inches from the grow shelf, I really don't need this powerful of a light. I usually keep it at about 70% power, and I can't really see going over that the way that I'm using it here. I do, however, prefer the cables on the Mars Hydro. It's nice also to have the option of removing the driver and having it separate. But those are things that are kind of minor, at least for the way that I'm using it. But if you're using these in a grow tent, I would probably recommend the Mars Hydro. And this hood here does seem to help a little bit with the light escaping. But in our 2-foot testing that we did, I was surprised to see that the Spider Farmer actually did not have as much light loss in the edges as far as the percentage of the intensity as the Mars Hydro, which was actually really surprising to me. And I'm guessing if I did the test on a wider area, maybe the Mars Hydro would do better in that test. But with the 2-foot by 2-foot test that we did, the Spider Farmer actually surprisingly did a little bit better than the Mars Hydro. Now, one thing we haven't talked about yet is the price. So I've been seeing both of these lights go up and down in price pretty greatly. Sometimes the Mars Hydro is more expensive and sometimes the Spider Farmer is more expensive. So they're both pretty much in a similar price range. But right now in the middle of March, the current prices, we've got the Spider Farmer is currently $118 on Amazon, and it does say it's a limited time deal. Sometimes they just say that and it's a limited time for a long time, but that is really a really good price. I don't think I've seen it that low before. I'm not sure how long it's going to be that low, but it's definitely a great price and is cheaper than the Mars Hydro currently. Now on the Spider Farmer website, they are selling it for $160. And last time I checked, it was actually cheaper on their website than it was on Amazon. So go figure. But if you do find that it's cheaper on their website, you can also use my 3% discount code Gapeys Grub. Now the Mars Hydro, on the other hand, is $140 on Amazon and only $125 on their website. And I do believe both of these companies have free shipping. So that is definitely worth looking into and comparing the price on both Amazon and their website before you buy it. And I also have a discount code for the Mars Hydro. It's 3% off and the code is Gapeys Grub. So I will also leave those codes and links in the description of this video. I hope you enjoyed this update. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.